Hello you guys, welcome back. So today we're just going to work on a couple little spring makeovers. So I'm going to go ahead and start out with making a cute little spring banner using the new IOD stamps called Insignia. So here I'm just picking out a little frame that I want to use, and I love the one that I picked out. It has like little floral details and it is just perfect. I love the idea behind these stamps. I love that you can spell out what you want and then add that pretty detail around the letters. It is just perfect. So I'm going to start out by cutting out the pieces for my banner using this little roll of fabric that I picked up sometime last year at the Goodwill bins. So since these stamps are new, I'm going to go ahead and prep them. It is recommended to give them a light sand before using them, so that is what I am doing here. I really wanted to use blue ink, but the only one I had here was this one from Dollar Tree, so I was just going to try it out. I end up going to black. I don't know if I like this color blue, but in case you do pick it up, this is the color blue you get. It's not a bad blue, it's just not what I was looking for. And I don't know how much projects you can actually get out of this little ink pad, but it seems to do the job. So when stamping fabric, you just want to make sure you ink up your stamps really well just to make sure that you get a nice clear image. So I decided I was going to do one banner that spelled out spring and a second one that spells out vintage, and I am using another little wreath around the vintage one. Look at how gorgeous this is. It has the little bow on the bottom. Bows are really in right now. I just love the detail on these little frames. So I laid out my letters and I'm gonna pick them up with the little, I guess this is a transfer sheet, carrier sheet, I don't know what it's called, but I went ahead and laid out my letters and picked them up, inked them up, and stamped my little fabric to spell out the word spring. So again, I also did make one that says vintage. If this was something that was going to be used like a tea towel or something like that, I would go ahead and set this with an iron so it can be washed. But since this is just going to be hanging, I don't think that it is necessary to do that. But if you are inking up some type of tea towel or something like that, I would set that with an iron. So I'm not sure what happened to the clip where it shows me gluing it, but all I do to hang this is glue a little opening on top, string it through some jute, and that is basically it. So this little bunny, I printed it on a hymnal sheet. I did get this from that same blog that I got the carrots from last video. I will link it down below. I was able to find it. And the way I printed it on this hymnal sheet was I taped it to a piece of cardstock, and that is how I got it to print on this hymnal sheet. So I'm going to trim off those straight edges before I decoupage it onto my scrap wood. So I'm going to go in with a generous amount of Mod Podge. This scrap wood was very dry, so I just want to make sure there's plenty on there so I can decoupage my paper onto this wood. So I'm going to lay my printable down and just push it down enough to where I can get all the bubbles out. And then I am going to go along the edges with some more Mod Podge. It just didn't seem like it was adhered well. And I did get a couple bubbles and had a little trouble on the bottom where there was a crack on the wood. But other than that, I think this came out really well. Here I'm just adding the Mod Podge to the edges and making sure it is all adhered. And I did give this a coat over the top. Now as you can see, I did get some bubbles. Had I not done the Mod Podge on the top, I probably would have gone in there with some parchment paper and an iron to smooth out any of the bubbles, let it dry, and then do the Mod Podge over. But since I had already gone in with the Mod Podge, I'm just leaving it and I'm just going to work with it. And I'm just going to go along the edges as always with some Distress Oxide. If I could use this stuff on everything, I probably would. And just to make those raw edges kind of look similar to what is on the front, I'm just going over that with some paint using a popsicle stick. So I'm just going to go over those bubbles with a sanding block just to smooth them out a little bit more. And that bump down the middle there is actually a crack that was in the wood. So there's nothing I can really do about that. But I still think this piece came out super cute. And lastly, I'm just going to add these little pin nails onto the corners of my piece here. And that is basically it. What do you guys think? Next up, I'm gonna give these little tin wall pockets a makeover. I did get these at the Goodwill bins. I'm just gonna tear off or cut the hanger that they currently have on them. Then just using some Snow White Waverly chalk paints, I'm gonna go ahead and give these a coat of white paint. So I do about 2 coats on these tins, and I do use like a stippling technique. I find that it's easier to paint a slick surface doing some stippling. I want to go ahead and decoupage this blue and white floral napkin onto my tin. I do take off any of the extra layers on the napkin before I decoupage it onto my tin. So since I can't really sand the edges off, since they both have a little bit of a lip on the top and the bottom, I am going to kind of measure out and see where I need to cut my napkin before I start to decoupage. And to cut my napkin, I'm just using a paintbrush with some water, and then I'll go ahead and tear the napkin versus cutting. I don't want that straight edge, so it can blend a little bit better onto the white paint. So I'm going to go ahead and add a layer of Mod Podge here, and then I'll go ahead and lay my napkin right over that, and then I will begin to smooth it out. So to smooth it out, I will use a cheap plastic glove. I pick up a pack from the Dollar Tree. This is just going to create a barrier between your fingers and the glove and allows it to be a lot easier to smooth out your napkin. Now with this part, you still want to take your time. The napkin is still very thin. I know it looks like I'm rushing through this, but this video is sped up. I would just say take your time to smooth out any of those wrinkles. And I usually don't get them all out, and I'm okay with that. And I do end up decoupaging the back, as these did sell on Saturday on my Whatnot show. So I do want them to have a finished look. So while sanding off some of that excess, I did get some lifting from the front. I'm just going to go over that with some Mod Podge and smooth down all those lifted areas. And then I'm just going to go ahead and seal it all up. Then just using the back of my paintbrush, I'm just going to push those holes right through so we can add a little hanger once we are done. So I'm just going to create a little label that's going to go on the front using that same fabric I used at the beginning of this video. And I am using Antiquities, and I'm going to go ahead and stamp this onto a little piece of fabric. And as I've mentioned before, anytime you are stamping fabric, just make sure you are coating your stamp very well to make sure you get a good imprint onto your fabric. So I'm going to add some Beacon fabric tack glue to all the edges of my little piece of fabric. Then I will lay it onto my tin and just kind of push that along all the edges. Some of the glue seeps through, but once it dries, it does not show. Then I just create a little hanger, and I also add some magnets because I think this is a cute little wall pocket to hang from like a fridge. And if you use those like really long matches, this is perfect to hold those in this tin. So I did add both just to leave it as an option, and that is basically it for this one. So I had these salvage pieces from a broken candelabra. I plan on making like a little riser. I'm gonna adhere that top plate using some JB Weld. Again, I've used this before here. I love it. It is the strongest hold I've used from any other glue. It does have a very stinky smell, so if you're sensitive to smells, I probably wouldn't recommend this, but it gives an amazing hold. So I'm gonna go ahead and push that through the two sides. It's two-sided, and you just basically mix those two together, and then I'll go ahead and add it onto my little piece here and adhere the plate to the top. So I start out by painting this little piece white. Now I did change my mind and end up wanting to paint it Apothecary from DIY Paint, so that is why you will see it green in the next clip. But it actually works out perfect because I ended up wet distressing it and bringing some of this white through, and it ended up giving it like a pretty layered paint finish. Once I'm done and satisfied with the wet distress, I give this a coat of white bare wax to seal it all up, and that is basically it. I actually had a little cloche that sat right on top of this, so that is how I styled it, and that is how it sold on Whatnot. So it came out super cute, and here is the end result. And for the last project on this video, I'm using these door plates that I picked up from Whatnot, and I'm gonna start out by giving this piece of wood a very chippy look. I'm basically just gonna go over it with some Apothecary paint from DIY, and I'm not painting it on. I'm basically just running that popsicle stick right over, and it's just gonna lay on all the raised pieces of this wood to make it look like a very chippy distressed piece. Right before editing this video, I actually watched Sharon over on Cozy Junk Studio create some amazing decor using some door plates just like these, very similar. She is so creative, and she just makes me want to collect all the buttons. I think I've mentioned her before. I don't even remember, but she just makes me want to collect all the buttons and all the little things to be able to do what she does. She is just amazing. So I set this aside to dry, and then I'm gonna go in with the door plate and attach it on using these little pin nails that I used on this previous project. I'm just gonna tap those right in to get this attached to the wood. Then I just strung this key onto a piece of lace, and I'm just going to wrap that around my piece here and tie it off, and then I will add like a little piece of pearl to the center. Then I did order a printable from Etsy, and it has a bunch of little quotes on it. I love the little flowers that they have around the border. It just kind of screams spring, so I cut one of those out and attach it to the bottom of my door plate. And I will make sure I link this Etsy shop down below, including the printable. And that is basically it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed what I created here today. If you like what you see, please subscribe and follow for more, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.